I have been trying to talk to you for the last almost year now, for this series.
I know, man. And it's great that we can finally connect, and life has given us an open window to just hang out and talk.
When was the first time that you and I connected? Because a lot of the people that I've interviewed are people that I've known or I have met. So I wanted to know if you remember perhaps the first time that we actually connected and I introduced myself to you, or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember connecting with you when we were a part of the Recast Coalition together. And there was a lot of people who were much older in the room, all had these kind of traditional nonprofits that I'd kind of been familiar with. And then there was one young upstart young man in the front, dressed top to bottom, taking notes, and just an eloquent speaker and prepared. And I was just like, man, who's this fella? I want to know what he's about. And I caught you in the hallway and was able to learn about you and the 821 Project. And then just trying to stay in touch with the many dialogues that you've been leading and being a part of thereafter. So I think that was my first introduction. It was really all professional, and I was just very impressed and pleased to get to meet you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the shout out. I appreciate the hyping me up, because when that era of my life happened, it was not necessarily a, peaceful, tranquil time. It was kind of chaotic. So having you being able to say, hey, I was very impressed with the work that you were doing when I was first introduced to you at a time in my life where I was feeling as though perhaps my work really wasn't necessary and I was fighting for space. It makes me feel good. But this interview is all about you and your perspectives and your journey and your story. The first question I want to ask to kind of get this whole party started is, where you're from, and talking to me a little bit about your upbringing.
I'm originally from Houma, Louisiana. It's just, in Terrebonne Parish, much further south from here. My mother was always from Houma, Louisiana. My father was from Grand Isle, Louisiana. Not born there, but raised, and graduated high school out of Grand Isle. So we're very close to the coastal wetlands and all. Until I was 8, we lived in a trailer. I was one of 5 kids in a very small house, and all of that was just normal to me. Until my parents moved into, a house without wheels, as we say. And it was like, oh, wow. We were kind of poor, I think. But, never going hungry, never without. Blessed to have a family with values of education. My mother was a principal, and I got to go to all the schools that she taught at. I had to go there, mostly because I was a little bit of trouble in school, so she needed to have a close rein on me. But very blessed to go to have a family that was a church-going family, very close-knit, very hardworking, and just very fortunate to have them.
I feel like there's a difference between being economically rich and being culturally rich, because a lot of times you might have a lot of money, but your environment and your upbringing isn't filled with a lot of culture and a lot of cultural capital or knowledge, whereas you may not have a lot of money, but you're constantly surrounded by people who have diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives. There are books in the home. There are a lot of different things that make your experience richer as far as your upbringing is concerned. It sounds like you had a very culturally rich childhood as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit more about Grand Isle, Houma, that whole part of Louisiana. I mean, I know of it being from South Louisiana, but there may be some people who are watching this and are like, Houma, where's that? Is that New Orleans? So, talk to me a little bit more about that whole part of Louisiana, because it's a very unique part of Louisiana.
So Houma is named after the Houma Indians, which is a nation of Native Americans that are, pretty much the remnants of many tribes. There's a number of Cajuns in that territory area. It's looked as a bayou country because there's a lot of waterways. It was settled by the people who were exiled from Nova Scotia. So all the food cultures, all those things, and Cajun music and Zydeco and A lot of seafood culture, a lot less interested in meat and farmland. It's much more involved in fishing, hunting. But Houma as a whole blew up because of the oil industry. So it's an oil town, just like the Grand Isle region and elsewhere. It's predominantly makes its income in being connected to the oil field. So you pretty much have your livelihood based off of the water or in every way, from working in the oil field or working in seafood. And then, of course, my family being education, you pretty much know everybody when you're in education, because everybody either goes to school or everybody's, a teacher or something connected to it. So, the towns are very small and it's very intimate relationships. And people learn to lean on each other a lot. And of course, what people don't know who watch this from other parts of the world is we have a culture centered around hurricanes and disasters, because our communities are built to be, unfortunately, they wash away. And then we rely on each other very heavily as neighbors to build each other up. So we're always sharing resources. We're always sharing tools, equipment, lumber, food, that kind of community, because we know in the blink of an eye, we desperately would need each other, and we have to hold on to each other to make it. So it's a special place. To me, it was a special place to grow up, a lot of really good people. And of course, not far from Thibodeau, where's Nicholls State University. So we get to be not too far from a university to be connected to education and higher ed. And so it's special, really special. For me, it's all the Cajun stories and jokes and things we did, sitting around campfires, sitting on the boat, sitting in camps, going crabbing, fishing. The heritage of my family was not written on paper. It was an oral history of who we all were, from my grandpa to my great grandpa to beyond. And many of them spoke French and only French until my grandfather learned English in around high school. He learned to speak English. And people would know I was only a couple generations away from a fully Cajun French speaking family. But that's pretty much a synopsis of some of the experiences.
Speaking of history, I know that you were a history teacher. You taught history before you started doing the work that you do now. So tell me a little bit more about your experiences being a history teacher, and what got you into that work.
Getting into that work was, I knew I was going to college, I really wanted to, but looking for something that I could study, I found that studying history was something that never got old to me. It was never a work to me. It was always a joy to learn, to read, and to be connected to the past and knowing so much about where we have come. I was always fascinated with all these stories and upbringings of, the movement of our planet through thousands of years, that everything was curious to me. So I enjoyed studying. And whenever it came time to graduate, it was, well, where do you use your knowledge? What do you do with this knowledge? And of course, if you have learned a great deal, you go to teach. And I wanted to be connected to teaching on a subject matter that meant a great deal to me, and that was Louisiana civil rights history. We are always caught up into the national civil rights history conversation because, especially with Martin Luther King Day coming so close. But Louisiana had very unique moments in our growth and transition that we barely ever talk about. It's not something that was pretty. It's not something that was exactly exciting and riveting in every way, but it was very impactful to the changes of our communities to make more impoverished and I guess marginalized and really oppressed communities be able to have more access to opportunities. We had a lot of work to change that in the state. So I went to education to teach about that. And as any good teacher will tell you, you teach nothing of what you're passionate about most days. Typically, there's a bunch of curriculum. There's a bunch of things that you have to teach first. And your students are being tested with national tests and scores. So you have to prepare them. You want them to pass. You can't let them fail. So very often I was teaching on subject matters that I wasn't as excited about. But what I knew that I loved in every way was the excitement and curiosity of young people to learn with me. That never grew old. The subject matter was not always what I was engaged in, but the individual and their track of being young and wanting to get more under their belt for their own personal identity as a person. That just became just the most amazing thing I could ever do, is to impart that to somebody.
And how did you go from being a history teacher to starting and creating Front Yard Bikes?
Front Yard Bikes started because I was always fixing and tinkering on bikes in my spare time in college, and for myself to enjoy and around friends that I rode with. And being from, a middle to low income family, you always learn to fix things yourself at some point if you can't afford for anybody else to. So I was volunteering at a community garden here in South Baton Rouge on Washington Street. And someone said there's a young guy who had a broke bike, and he was looking for somebody to help him fix it. And they pointed him in my direction. So I said, sure. Come to my house. At the time, I was living in South Baton Rouge. And I said, I'll teach you to fix your bike. He came riding on a bike that was so broken, that had no clue what to do. And I was like, man, this thing is so busted up. I think all we can do is dig a hole, bury it, and say a prayer. And that's about it for this bike. But I had a bike that a roommate had left me who had moved away. And I said, look, I'll let you earn this bike by learning skills, and I'll teach you everything I know, and you can have it. It only took us about 2 days in summertime to do that. He did all the work. He earned the bike, and I thought that'd be the only kid that I would maybe do that with in my time. Instead, he brought brother and then sister and then one friend after another, until lo and behold, there's about 15 kids in my yard and can't find the tools because the grass is too tall. And it's like, where's all this energy coming from? What is this that so many kids want to learn this way with tools and mechanics, and they want to ride these bicycles, and what is it all about? So I had a group of roommates and a number of friends that were idealists like me, who were thinking, how do we capture this energy that these amazing kids are bringing to just a yard? And we kept trying to learn, kept trying to make new things and ways for the kids to engage, until people coined us the Front Yard Bike Shop. And we knew that we had to become a 501c3 nonprofit and go through the proper paperwork to grow this organization, not because we wanted to be a big nonprofit, but because we wanted the kids who had come to get a kind of program they deserved, a program that was worth their talent, worth their time and energy. And that meant it needed to be more than just my little yard that I'm renting from a landlord, need to be better. So that started about 10 years ago, the slow growth of Front Yard Bikes into what it is today.
I actually had a chance to go to Front Yard Bikes, the site that's across from the Carver Library, and it was beautiful. I mean, there are just bikes everywhere. So many people were engaged. Y'all have a garden. Y'all have a lot of stuff going on. And I think that I was able to see the site about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So at the time that I was able to see Front Yard Bikes, where were you in your journey as the director of the organization? Where were you kind of situating yourself in terms of the things you'd accomplished at that time and the presence you had built in the community?
At that time, we had really maximized the capacity of our building and everything we were doing, to number of kids, to number of volunteers. We were at the overwhelm point of like, okay, we're now seeing a lot of people. We have a lot we're doing, but it felt like it was a mile wide and only a foot deep. It's like we don't have a lot of depth to what we're doing that is meaningful enough to be a concrete foundation for young people to grow off of. Or we're trying to make this rich environment for our kids to then move into transitions to better opportunities and better connections that will last a lifetime with them, not just the period of, an afternoon. So we decided that we needed to invest in a retail front to get a business operation, to do retail services and repairs of bikes, that we needed to get our older students who had gone on beyond our program to be employed there, to get more credentialed experience that would be on paper. And then really some of our kids who have not found employment anywhere, some had left school, quit school, didn't really see the use in it, but were struggling to make it on a daily basis because they had so many financial constraints and opportunity barriers, abounding around them. So we said, we got to take control of this in our own way and make our own business and hire our own people, and at the same time further education and further their resume as they grow. That side was just starting to happen when I met you, and we were just starting to go to the phase of hiring teenagers, high schoolers, to do after school jobs. So I said, look, we're running all these programs, but we only have volunteers for so long. we only have AmeriCorps members or anybody for a year stint, and we're wearing ourselves out because it's too much for too few people. So we said, where can we make the most out of any money? Well, let's hire our young people. They're the most credentialed. They're the most talented. They've been doing this since they were 10. Now they're 14, 15. They're 5 years in to doing all this stuff. They made the rules on the walls. They wrote them up. Let them be in control. Let them to be leaders. And let's have more of them to run this place because it's theirs to begin with. Give them the reins a little bit more, and let's compensate them because they're worth their salt, and start to teach our kids, you're worth your time. It shouldn't always be free,
And that's what I think is so unique about Front Yard Bikes, is that you actually are teaching young people tangible skills, because Baton Rouge is a very bikeable city, honestly speaking. So, it's a city where, even though it's not pedestrian friendly, bike culture has become increasingly popular in Baton Rouge, especially in the Old South mid-city part of the city, where there's a lot more, green space, there's better connected roads compared to other parts of the parish. And there's a lot more, I guess, young people and younger generations who are moving there, who aren't as automobile oriented as older generations and more affluent generations. And yeah, I wish I didn't sell my bike, because I had owned a bike in almost a decade, but it feels like every time I get on a bike, I magically remember my skills. I magically remember, how to ride a bike again. It's kind of like, that's a skill I probably will never forget, how to ride a bike.
See, we have to stop you there, Jahi. Why don't you have a bike? Come on, man. Look at us. Come see us, Jahi. We got to get you a bike. We'll make it. We'll make it work for you. We got it. Look, let's start it right now. We need to start working to get Jahi a bike. Anybody who's watching on this feed stream podcast, look, we got to get Jahi a bike. Jahi, this is unacceptable. Okay. I will guarantee you'll be riding in 2021 with us. Sound good? We got to make it happen.
Okay.
I'm pushing this forward. I won't have
history. Wow. History has been made. For the first time, someone offered me something on expanding our roots, and I was offered a bike. And guess what? My birthday's in April, so that's a good timeline.
We're going to beat you before April. You're going to be riding real soon. We're going to make this work.
Okay. All righty. Well, okay. So to get serious again, speaking of just the work that you all do, and on a more serious note, the work that you do is very unique. And that's what I found very intriguing about Front Yard Bikes, because there are a lot of organizations who do very similar things. And this isn't to bad talk anybody, because I feel like everything is valuable. But what makes Front Yard Bikes unique is that it not only gives agency to kids and young people. Young people have power, they have value, they have importance. They are active participants in their community as opposed to passive, agents just existing. But another thing that's unique is that you all do bikes, which is something I don't see often. And when you have unique organizations, especially in Baton Rouge, they typically get seen a certain way or viewed a certain way. As when you're working with mostly marginalized youth or, African-American youth, oftentimes there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of negativity that some may kind of say, or even subconsciously view as far as African-American youth goes. Oftentimes you'll see we got to keep them off the streets. We got to, get them, we got to stop them from doing this, when young people are not that linear. Young people are very complex. And it feels like when you work with youth, you often have to fight these very negative perceptions of the youth that you work with. So what are some misconceptions that you've had to kind of confront doing the work that you do with young people, especially young people in marginalized backgrounds?
I'm glad you asked that, because there's always a challenge that we have to deal with in regards to, Front Yard Bikes is, working with troubled youth or at-risk youth, or it's doing charity work by, giving these kids bikes. Whew. And not the other way around of, these are some amazing young people that took their own intuition to dream up an after-school program, to build it piece at a time, to invest the sweat and energy to beautify it, to learn all the mechanics at a young age, to learn how to do all the construction of the gardens and the buildings, and to engage in our welding things and our after school jobs. And it's just when you start to change the narrative from what Mr. Dustin does for the kids and say, actually, I hold the keys to the door, but when the door is open, it's a dead building. It's like an engine with nothing happening. When you realize the real power is the young people who come through, it's like they're the gasoline. They're the explosiveness of energy and wonderment and joy that makes everything in this infrastructure work. Otherwise, it's just one guy in a building with a bunch of bikes, and who cares about that, So the narrative of it's really these young people who are doing this, making this. And even though they have sometimes a challenging background story, or a challenging environment, I always like to describe our kids as the flowers that grow in the cracks of sidewalks. They shouldn't, by natural standard, the environment's not conducive. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't work. So it makes them that more awe-inspiring to grow anyway, to achieve anyway, for all the obstacles to be stacked up in front of you and this young person, and they beat the challenge anyway. That's just amazing. That's just amazing. But people too often want to give credit to me, and probably because I'm a white guy in a neighborhood that's predominantly of color, and try to prescribe that I'm fixing kids, and we're not doing that. And we're not keeping them out of trouble, or keeping them out of the streets, or keeping them busy. Everything they're doing is building blocks of opportunity for themselves, and their success makes our entire city a better place to live. Everything they do makes us a better place. So they're the solution to our problems, not the problems to be solved, is the constant thing I try to say.
I'm very intentional about the words that I use, because, I feel like words have power and words have meaning. So a lot of times people are like, oh, why do we have to be so politically correct, yada, yada, yada. But words have power, words have meaning. When you say that somebody is underprivileged, it diminishes their power, and it ignores the fact that there are systems that are disempowering. When you say, I say marginalized, because these are people who are still beautiful, still great, still dope, still amazing, have talent, have skills, but something is silencing them. Something is diminishing their power. So it's not as though, they just so happen to be poor. They just so happen to be vulnerable, or they just so happen to be quote unquote at risk. They are trying to live their lives and be successful, but their ability to be as successful as others is diminished. And I think that, changing the narrative of youth and how young people are talked about and spoken to is very important, and especially in a city like Baton Rouge, where a lot of young people don't see their community as one that they can invest in. I mean, I was that young person who I was like, okay, at high school, I'm leaving and never coming back. But had I had more people, because I did have young people that invested in me. I was in forward arts. I did, spoken word. I had really awesome high school teachers. But if I had a community collectively nurturing me and embracing me, as I'm seeing now with all these beautiful organizations like yours and Humanities Amp and so many other people, then I would have had a different view of my community. You all are very well respected in the community, and not only in the community, but also by political leaders and community leaders. And one of those is the mayor, Mayor Sharon Weston Broome. I think that she was a part of one of your bike rides. Tell me more about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had the mayor want to join in on a community ride, and she was on the move. So you always had the mayor on the move events. And a couple of times she wanted to ride a bike. So we outfitted her a pretty cool bike. Not as cool as yours is going to be, Jahi, but pretty cool. And, she said, let's go ride. And so we got all our kids to go and join in on that ride and participate with the mayor. And, that was an affirmation of our kids. The mayor wants to take a time out to ride with you. Not the other way around of like, oh, how lucky are you to ride with the mayor? It's like, oh, no, the mayor knows your hot stuff. So she wants to ride with you. She wants to be seen rolling around with the FYB crew, which is, while Front Yard Bikes is, in the community and has respect from our community, we like to let everybody know we are the community. The community is us. Even the handful of folks who have not been happy about us, and came to confront us, say, look, if there's a problem that's wrong, then we need your voice to join in the conversation then. So be in the building and join us. And after that, it's like, oh, well, I'm in. Yeah, you're in. So what we got to fix? Help fix us together. And sure enough, we get to the bottom of our problems and challenges with our neighbors and everybody. So riding with the mayor was awesome, but being inclusive that, we are the community. Front Yard Bikes is, as a building can go away, as bikes can go away, our people, we are people. The people will continue well beyond, my time and the time of this place.
It is great to have the affirmation of someone as established and as of high of an office as the mayor, because not only did she make time to, join y'all and to affirm your work, but it also showed that the work that you all are doing is something that is making a material difference, because the mayor isn't just gonna, show up, to everything. And the fact that she did show that your work has value, your work is valuable, and the people and the young people specifically that you work with, they have a lot of value that you are tapping into and allowing them to bring out into the world. But I also know that y'all aren't just doing, the bike, fixing bikes and the gardening and the different community wellness work that you all are doing. I also know that you are doing a lot of humanitarian work as well, especially in the midst of this pandemic. I remember, seeing a lot of posts from you with regards to getting food to kids, especially with a lot of the schools closing during the first phases of the pandemic. Tell me a little bit more about what made you want to take on this initiative of delivering food to young people and to kids and families, and what came out of that. Like, what was the result of you doing this work?
So when the pandemic, first began to close, a number of first schools and agencies and every entity that had access to public, was public to the people to use. The first thing we started thinking about was, what are we going to do with our students? How are we going to make sure they're taken care of and still engaged to some degree so that they're safe and healthy? So first thought was, where's food in our community that's going to be accessible? We learned about where those locations were. So then we set up, well, what do our kids have as far as an access point where they have their bikes to be able to ride to these locations to pick up food and be at least a resource for them to go from A to B and do that. So if we can't have face-to-face interactions, we'll at least fix the bikes of all the kids and make sure they'll stay mobile to access food resources and education resources to pick up supplies, right? So that was the first intention. Well, we're at a BREC facility here on Terrace Street, and BREC had already made an agreement with the 3 O'Clock Project, which is a great feeding agency, and began to want to drop off food at our location. Well, we'd already told our kids, don't come to the shop to congregate, because we simply want to build a network and try to sustain it with you, but not have a large congregation of students at our facility where they could get sick and bring that back to their families. So we said, okay, all this food's getting dropped off. What do? We got permission to pick up that food and deliver it door to door. And that was a realization that, okay, we can help our students and families not have to worry about transportation or worry about access in bad weather or even with COVID exposure. They can really stay home, stay safe, stay indoors, and we can go door to door with food and academic kits from the Knock Knock Museum and East Baton Rouge Parish Public Libraries, and even our own shop can continue to do virtual bike mechanic classes that we did with YouTube videos and workbooks that we drop off, and the kids can still earn bikes and prizes and all those things from home. So trying to make that shift, because it's easy to sit on this call with you, Jahi, and sit on this with you and say, our kids matter. It's different when you got to put your boots on the ground and go prove it and say, no, you matter to me enough that I'm willing to show up with the things that you're needing and want, because you're so worthwhile. And we need you to be well for our future to be a great place to live. We need you. So we're going to put ourselves out there and put our resources to it because you're worth that. That's a different demand for our kids to know we're serious, because we want that same investment back when we're asking our students to, do what they got to do academically, whether they're virtual or not. Do that because you're worthwhile. We know we believe you're worthwhile. We do it. We proved it, didn't we? Coming seeing you every single day for months on end, making sure you got what you needed. We didn't do that because, we didn't believe in you. So I'm asking you, believe in yourself as much as we do. That's all I want. Believe that much. And I know you'll succeed in all the areas that you're going to put your time into. So it's been a wild journey, transition, about 20,000 meals delivered later, 10,000 educational kits delivered later. We really only were able to see maybe 200 kids in all over the period of that time, but very proud of our team that, we stopped at different moments to, when we had COVID challenges, but we did our best to stay fluid and make sure our kids stayed, our students and youth stayed our priority and the family stayed our priority.
What does your work look like now in the midst of this pandemic?
Since our students started going back to school, it's been really challenging because some are virtual, some are in person, some are quarantining. Every day we have a challenge where we hear about a new case. We have transitioned to do community rides to the Knock Knock Children's Museum every Wednesday and to do community rides every Friday so our students can still build the network of opportunities of how to get there and where to go. That has really been still a focus. Still providing food, but more so on site for pickup for students to come and receive through the 3 o'clock project. And really outdoors activities only is all we can do. We can't have a lot of students in our facility. So staying active, staying outdoors, we all really want to do more. I think that says for everybody who's equipped with experience and knowledge of programs for young people, we all want to do more. But we're thankful for what we can do and getting our kids away from a screen for a minute, get their, blink their eyes and just take a break, jump on a bike, turn a wrench, get in the garden, be involved with some of these other small lessons is really meaningful. Now, aside from the day programs, Front Yard Bikes has been working to capacity build constantly. We're expanding our garden territory. And even more significant, we purchased a 10,000 square foot building, which is huge for us because we were very close to not having any spaces to operate out of initially due to renovations needed at our park and due to our business being on a month to month because it was putting up for sale, which I think was sped up due to COVID. So we found a 10,000 square foot church and collaborated with Humanities Amped and Line for Line and the Big Buddy program to buy this building and build out infrastructure for the future, because we know we're going to get back to a point where our students can come in person. We need to have the programs and spaces that, is worth their time, worth their energy.
I'm hearing a lot of talk about the future, and you already invested in this big building with Amped and all these other organizations to kind of use this building as a launch pad for more youth programming in Baton Rouge. Beyond that, what else would you like to accomplish with the work that you're doing here in the community?
That's really hard to, I guess, pontificate too much further into the future because, you don't know what the future holds right now at all. I can say that I have high hopes to evolve what we're doing to continue to incorporate more of our older youth. As kids get beyond high school, we get to a chance where you can go to higher education. If you don't have that opportunity for higher education, there's the then what? Am I going straight to work? Where do I go to work? How do I continue to make sure I have mobility for opportunity? Take care of your family, kind of that continuation of needing a network and really still needing to fall back on your community pillars when it doesn't really take off the way you want it to. I think the focal point for me is to continue to grow as our students have grown. They're now high school grads, a number of students that I've been able to teach and be involved with. So what do those kinds of things look like? Does it look like so many things, from housing to just economic, family planning and financial planning, and so many little things that you end up learning more sometimes on your own, unless you really have a family member or someone who can advise you. So pulling into those things, and not, knowing me, Jahi, it can't just simply be in conversation. We have to get it to where it's on paper, to where it's legitimately experienced. Something that I like to hope for is that the building that we purchased be somehow community owned, but not just by Front Yard Bikes, somehow that we can get a share holding system for the young people who are in our program, so that they legitimately have a piece of owning, $1 million property. And could that somehow benefit them financially for getting a loan or getting credit or any amount of support? That way, should, let's say, Front Yard Bikes and all organizations can no longer sustain this facility, or we're older and moving on, it's no longer a need, and it was to be sold, well, all of our students who've come through deserve a check in the mail. They deserve some sort of recognition that, oh, here's your share, because you put the sweat, you put the time and energy, you crossed the threshold of putting in a lot into this place. This belongs to you. And if it benefits you in a way that helps you in your family and your livelihood, or at least leverages for other things, and good.
One last question. And I always ask this question because if you've ever had a job interview or any kind of interview, you may always leave with this feeling of, man, I wish I said this. Man, I wish I said that. Man, I should have talked more about this. So the last question I want to ask is if you have any final thoughts, anything you want to say that you maybe didn't have a chance to say earlier, or maybe something you just want to conclude this interview on.
I think before the end of my career working at Front Yard Bikes and being involved in community work here in Baton Rouge, before the end, the greatest thing that I would like to see happen, or greatest accomplishment I'd like to achieve, is, in all sincerity, a cultural shift in our community in terms of our work in public schools, in public entities, libraries, really everywhere where we are working with young people, to transition our mentality of who our kids are as people. What's their identity? What is their makeup? Quite often we have a lot of typecasting, a lot of profiling, and quite a bit of, utilizing our challenges as our identifier. And I mean that in the sense of, we're in a low-income environment, so we'll just say, oh, that kid's poor, impoverished. We're living in an environment that maybe has some challenges, is dangerous, so we'll say, oh, they're at-risk kids. These verbs and words and adjectives that already give a young person their station in life, and we never give them the opportunity to grow out of it to where that stops being how people talk about young people. I like to do away with it entirely. Realize that every young person we have is a worthwhile asset, and really the only person who's going to change the future, because they'll be there. They'll be in the future with the skill sets, with the talents to make the difference. Whereas the remainder of us, we're fading. We'll be gone. They won't be. So we need to constantly remind ourselves and constantly realize we need to invest, put our time and energy into. There is no charity work. Charity work does nothing. It feeds a man for a day. Same with, there is no potential to be. No, you are. Because if you're not the one, who is? So let's stop thinking of, oh, you have potential. Oh, no, you're the game changer here right now. That's you. And that, in our mind, if we can just grab a hold of it and act like it, our school systems will be better. Our, prison reform will change. All the things will change because we realize the people we're spending time with actually are worth it. They're worth better. And settling for less is just not going to settle with us anymore.
Yeah, and it demonstrates just how interconnected not only we are as human beings, but also our work. Because on the surface, it's front yard bike seems like one thing, but in practice, it's a completely different thing, which is totally intersectional with so many other movements going on in this city, in this state, in this nation, and also in this world. And nothing is even more evident of the power of front yard bikes than the fact that you have so many people that I'm seeing behind you that are just, in the space, or so many bikes, or just having so many people have nothing but love for the work that you do in the community. And I would include myself as a part of that. Thank you so much, Dustin. I know you're super, super busy, but I appreciate you so much for taking the time to talk to me and to share your story. And my hope is that those who are watching this or listening to this conversation take place will continue to see your story as one added to a narrative of Louisiana being a place of problem solvers and not just problems to be solved. And also just how rich in culture and consciousness Louisiana is.
Absolutely. And thank you, Johnny, for having me. I will do my best to make time so I have time in the future for you at all times. And you just got to make time to get on that bike with us when it's done, Jahi. Get ready. You'll
there
be pedaling.
Goes that bike.
2021. Like, I'm not letting it go. He thinks he's going to get away with this, y'all. He's not.
Well, guess what? I will end the interview with you on candid camera saying you're going to get me a bike. And that's how I'm going to end this interview.
Got you. It's coming.